In 1968, the six-part Second Doctor story Fury from the Deep aired as the penultimate serial of Doctor Who's fifth season. Yes, even during Tom Baker month I have to make it about Trout and cry about it. Penned by fellow wholesome homo and former script editor for the show Victor Pemberton, it was quite the vivid tale. Starting with the Doctor investigating strange occurrences on a gloomy beach, and disturbing seaweed and an ominous heartbeat heralding an invasion from a malevolent aquatic force. The day ultimately being saved when it is defeated by high-frequency sound. Speaking of sound, it must be stated that this outing only really exists as an auditory experience, but that doesn't stop it from being one of the most memorable adventures of Doctor Who's early years. To many, this is Victor's only story for the show, and as far as TV is concerned, that's true. But of course, there's more to Doctor Who than what's on television, and 8 years later, he got the opportunity to write one more outing. In 1976, the two-part Fourth Doctor story Doctor Who and the Pescatons hit the shelves, during the summer break between seasons 13 and 14. With fellow cool queer Victor Pemberton returning to hold the pen, it was quite the vivid tale. Starting with the Doctor investigating strange occurrences on a gloomy beach, and disturbing seaweed and an ominous heartbeat heralding an invasion from a malevolent aquatic force. The day ultimately being saved when it is defeated by high-frequency sound. Speaking of sound, it must be stated that this outing only really exists as an auditory experience, but that doesn't stop it from being one of the most memorable experiences of Doctor Who's early years. Huh. This is quite the oddity. Tied with Exploration Earth as one of the earliest official Doctor Who audio dramas, the license to create what would end up becoming Pescatons was granted to Decca Records, the finished product ultimately being released on wax through their Argo Records division. According to Victor Pemberton himself, the director for the production, Don Norman, commissioned him to write the story because of a mutual connection, and Victor was known to be a reliable choice given his experience not only with Doctor Who, but radio drama as a medium. The two of them then met up with Tom Baker, and together they workshopped the premise they wanted to tell with this play, resulting with the familiar setup of a marine alien force coming ashore to assail the landlubbers. And as glib as I was about this earlier, Victor was well aware that he was covering familiar ground. Fury from the Deep was already inspired by one of his earlier projects anyways, and dude admitted that he was just really fascinated by the daunting mystery of the sea, and who could blame him? Once the script was ready, the actual making of the tale was apparently very breezy. In an interview for the 2005 CD re-release, Elizabeth Sladen dimly recalled being given the script a night or two before going in the studio to record it, and having performed her segments in a single morning just a short time before filming was set to begin on The Mask of Mandragora. This interview is gold, by the way, 43 minutes long, and the subject of Pescatons gets dropped by the 7-minute mark. Love that. Aside from Baker and Sladen as the Doctor and Sarah Jane, the only other cast member was Bill Mitchell as Zor, the leader of the ferocious Pescatons. Composer Kenny Clayton quickly served up a distinctive, very Pertwee-esque soundtrack for the outing, and Brian Hodgson, the man credited for creating the original TARDIS sound back in the 60s, got involved with the sound effects of this production despite having left Doctor Who behind 3 years prior, apparently providing this alternate rendition of the TARDIS materialization sound as the BBC wouldn't let Argo Records use the normal one for whatever reason. All this happened in mid-spring 1976, and the completed product saw public release later that July. And that's how it all went down. But of course, you want more than just a summary of its creation, you want me to delve into the actual story. Alright, we're doing this. So the first thing to note here is the narrative structure. This story takes on an interesting segmented presentation, alternating between a standard third-person perspective with multiple performed characters like a television episode, a first-person point of view focused on the Doctor's inner monologue in certain scenes, and then just Tom Baker straight up describing the story without doing it. On paper, it's like a precursor to some of Big Finish's content, though the way it's done here has some interesting effects on the actual plot being told. After an introductory narration, the TARDIS arrives at the beach on a dark, cold night, and it's not long before the Doctor and Sarah sense that something is amiss. They find mysterious seaweed, they hear a chilling heartbeat, Victoria scream— oh wait, not that last part. But the strengths of the play are immediately obvious. From an immersion standpoint, they bring these third-person scenes to life splendidly. The sound design is well done, the pacing is at just the right tempo to earn a sense of foreboding tension, the dialogue is naturalistic and true to the Doctor and Sarah's characters, and Baker gives a pretty solemn and intense performance that suits the gloomy mood of the tale, with Victor writing the Doctor to be quite deductive in his outlook. I dig it.
Of course, I had no idea where or in which period of time we had arrived, with curling white foam gently lapping the shore. We were both overwhelmed by a feeling of deep apprehension.
Why are you putting so much emphasis on the H?
What are you talking about? I'm just saying it. Cool Whip. You put Cool Whip on pie. Pie tastes better with Cool Whip.
After some well-done build-up, the Doctor and Sarah have their first encounter with a Pescaton and barely escape with their lives, and that's when we whiplash into getting the next chunk of plot bluntly summarised to us in a mere few sentences. What in a television story would be 15 minutes of finding out exactly where they were, meeting and establishing the supporting characters, learning of other mysterious incidents that propel the plot forward, is all delivered to us as essentially a Cliff Note summary by the Doctor in a minute or two. Yeah, that's a little jarring. But then the next scene kind of gives us the best of both worlds. After learning that multiple scientific expeditions have vanished in the Thames estuary while trying to excavate a supposed meteorite, the Doctor opts to go diving to investigate for himself, which the play thankfully chooses to depict rather than summarise. And since such a scenario is hard to convey on audio, the Doctor's narration is written in present tense to showcase his in-the-moment reactions to what he finds. And again, the pacing is slow, deliberate, and complements this presentation choice perfectly. The sound design making you feel like you're underwater in the oppressive darkness with him. It's actually quite creepy when the Doctor describes the macabre sight of the expedition's skeletal remains. And his emphasis on dramatic beats like during his tackle with the seaweed is very effective. Can you imagine what a CSO nightmare this would have been on TV, by the way? But as mentioned, the tale keeps flipping between these different narrative perspectives to herky-jerk results. Upon recognising the threat and returning from his dip, we get a fleshed-out, fully performed scene of the Doctor relaying his findings to Sarah.
Fish who can build a spacecraft and fly off to other planets?
Yes.
Oh, sounds a bit far-fetched to me, Doctor.
Why? Girl, you've seen dinosaurs in modern-day London and robot Egyptian mummies. This is just another day at the office for you.
Well, of course I've been there. I think it was sometime back in the 15th century.
The 15th century? Well, just how old are you?
He has a time machine. Oh, whatever, moving on. But that's immediately followed up by another brief summary of the non-existent supporting characters disbelieving the Doctor's findings, before we're suddenly assaulted with stock screams representing the population of London as the Doctor spectates on the Pescaton emerging from the Thames and going on a rampage. Credit where it's due, I guess the widespread metropolitan carnage depicted here is one factor in which this narrative differs from Fury from the Deep. Then there's one more scene grounded in the Doctor's in-the-moment experience as he ventures into the aquarium to confront the dying creature, and again it's quiet and tense, and Victor's contrasting apprehension and wonder for the murky depths is so palpable.
Fins, slimy scales, shells, claws, tentacles. It was an uneasy feeling to know that I was being watched by hundreds of penetrating eyes, waiting, watching.
The Pescaton unceremoniously dies, followed by the cliffhanger of more meteorite-like objects falling into the Thames estuary as the Pescaton invasion truly begins. So that was all over the place, and part 2 ain't exactly any more cohesive. As the invasion expands to a global scale, the story proceeds to contextualize the Doctor's prior experience of these Pescaton creatures by flashing back to a previous encounter he had with them on their home planet of Pesca in the constellation of Pisces, because Mathemes, a descriptive first-person account of the planet's drying wastelands, gives way to, well, the ground giving way, followed by the Doctor coming face to face with Zor, the Pescaton leader. It's here where we learn these creatures' motivation. Their once oceanic world is in a doom spiral approach to its sun and has become inhospitable, and Zor, already knowing of the Doctor somehow, wants him to take his species to another planet. The Doctor refuses, kind of uncharacteristically. Zor doesn't even state any goals of conquest here, he just wants his race to survive, and the Doctor won't help because, I don't know, the entire race is supposedly predisposed to be evil. Flimsy androgum logic aside, Zor attempts to mesmerize the Doctor into submission, and the Doctor really sells the sheer strength of Zor's mental powers with his vivid description of how helpless and violated he feels under this psychic attack, like the life is ebbing away from his body. He then immediately negates this by following it up with,
However, my resistance was more than the Pescaton leader had anticipated, and his mental pressure was no match for the special powers that I have been gifted with. I found my way back to the surface and escaped from the evil that had almost engulfed me on the planet of Pesca.
I'm not even mad, that's just funny. Back in the present, the Doctor omnipresently narrates the dread and chaos of the Pescatons' impending attack from the deep, punctuating the brutality of it all with emphasis on how helpless the human resistance is. Sarah Jane turns up for another dialogue scene with an abandoned baby in tow, as you do, and her conversation with the Doctor here is just sparkling. Even behind the mic in a recording studio, their chemistry is mwah. Also, the Doctor needs to distract a Pescaton from attacking Sarah and a baby here, and his frantic attempts result in this.
Hello, Dolly. Well, hello, Dolly.
I didn't know that I needed this in my life until just this moment. And that's not all, because after the Pescatons briefly retreat to rehydrate and one of them gets stuck in the London Underground, the Doctor and Sarah trail it and...
Doctor, what are you doing? This is a fine time to start playing your piccolo.
I always play the piccolo when I'm nervous. Relieves the tension.
Yeah. You know, playing the piccolo. That famous Fourth Doctor idiosyncrasy that has totally always been a thing, and not at all pulled from the darkest recesses of Tom's colon. It just so happens that the high notes of the instrument harm the Pescaton, by the way, cluing the Doctor and Sarah in on the species' vulnerability to high-frequency sound. And with Zor apparently being the nerve centre of the Pescaton species, the Doctor figures that destroying him would wipe them all out, and he seemingly has no reservations about doing this. And so he encounters Zor hiding out in a sewer. They share some generic dialogue and one last hypnotism battle, at which point the Doctor springs his trap of high-frequency sound amplifiers to kill Zor. You will almost certainly have to turn your volume down during this bit. The entire Pescaton species is thusly wiped out, with neither the Doctor, Sarah, or really the narrative itself sparing the slightest shred of remorse over the genocide. Yes, I get it, they were warmongering invaders who probably wouldn't have listened to reason anyways, but no ultimatum, no warning, not even any morose introspection like, it's a shame it came to this, something there should have been another way? Huh. Kinda wild that the Doctor felt more conflicted 1 year earlier about the mere possibility of destroying the Dalek race than he did about actually wiping out a species of space sharks. Either way, Pesca is destroyed by its sun, the Doctor bids the audience farewell, and the play ends. So, that was an experience. What can I even say? Doctor Who and the Pescatons is certainly a quaint little curiosity, not only as a pre-Big Finish Doctor Who audio, but also as essentially a bonus adventure for the 4th Doctor and Sarah. And it certainly has its moments for sure, but the weird abbreviated nature of half the plot kinda makes it feel stunted. Like, imagine if you were watching a classic Who serial, only for half the experience to be replaced by a blunt smash cut to the story's Wikipedia synopsis. That's what listening to this play feels like, and with elements of the vastly superior Fury from the Deep embedded in its DNA, it feels kinda redundant. That said though, it is also very breezy and accessible, and I confess I have repeatedly listened to it as background noise while just chilling out, so it has that appeal about it. The play would see occasional re-release on CD throughout the years, and in 1991 a novelisation written by Victor Pemberton himself was published among the last spattering of Target novelisations, which, in its own way, expands on and somewhat modifies the story to be a more cohesive overall experience, with the truncated parts of the original tale expanded on with additional characters and narrative set pieces. I respect that. Obviously, as an actual story, it still doesn't hold a candle to Fury from the Deep, but it doesn't need to. For what it is, it's a cute side project to an era that was already cranking out constant bangers anyway, so despite my criticisms, I can't be too hard on it. So in conclusion, y'all better start including this in your marathons. That's right, between Seeds of Doom and Mask of Mandragora, stick this baby on and bask in its glory. Just pretend that the Doctor really has been playing the piccolo all this time, and it'll slot right in, I swear.